So yeah, I've met Packlids before. They're not like that.
I once saw a Packlid win an entire chess tournament by playing every other player at the same time.
Right. Okay.
So I don't really get what's going on here. I mean, I get it. We're at Red Alert. It's sad that Geordi's gone missing. I mean, he was asking for it, really. But
yeah, he's always beaming over places.
Yeah, where he doesn't belong. But have these people never seen University Packlet, which is hosted by Jeremy Packlet? They're really smart. They're really clever. I don't get it.
Is there?
Is this a bit? Are the Packlets doing a bit?
It doesn't. It seems beneath them, if anything. Is it just like, what if it's? Look, I don't want to use. Have we? Look, I'm just saying that Packlid ship is a little bit shorter than the rest of the Packlid ships that I've seen. Normally they're longer and fully packed with Packlids, but this one's like quite short and only got like fewer Packlids on it. Have we run into the Packlid short bus?
I think that this is a Packlet. See, what people don't know about the Packlets is that they come out fully adult-sized.
Right, okay.
I think this is a Packlet primary school trip.
That could be it. Or there might be a gas leak.
Oh, hold on, we're getting a hail. Oh, it's from Mrs. Jeremy Packlet. She must be a teacher at Packlet Primary School. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Turns out they were just 8 years old.
Oh, right. Okay.
Needless to say, that's why they outsmarted Geordi.
Well, the last time Geordi got in trouble for something with an 8-year-old, it was, we had that meeting with HR, didn't we? But I don't care how quickly they mature on that planet, Geordi. Wrong is wrong. Podcasts. A Frontier. These are the voyages of the podcast Captain Slug. Its ongoing mission to explore strange new episodes, to seek out new jokes and new references, to split infinitives that no one has split before. Captain Slug, Stardate 42. I'm Eddie Edwards. I'm joined as always by Mark Bench as we trek our way through all of Star Trek. And just to get it out of the way, given that the patron saint of this podcast is Miles O'Brien and me and Mark both have a beer, recent news events insist that we start with Up the Raw.
Up the Raw. We always knew Jerry was going to outlast them.
I will say I got the best review ever on our last episode, which was not from anyone who's listened to it, but from my girlfriend, Emma, who was in the room next door when I came out after we'd recorded, literally looked at me and went, "That is the most I have ever heard you talk about Star Trek whilst recording an episode."
Was it the Borg? Yeah, it was the Borg, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that trend is certainly not going to continue.
No.
I actually quite liked this episode.
Yeah, I do. I very much like the. I don't know which plot is the A plot and which plot is the B plot, but I like the Picard Wesley stuff quite a lot.
Yeah,
I think that the other storyline, I think, might be problematic.
So right, yes, a little bit, isn't it? Yeah, it's
yeah.
The Packlets,
Packleds, yeah. I had to Google that, but yeah, it's
they
Packleds.
Actually come back as the main villain of Lower Decks season 2 because they're so underestimated by the Federation that no one is really doing anything to stop them continuing to do that thing that they're doing. So they essentially are a kind of like a shit Borg. They just go and assimilate other cultures and just take all their stuff. But by the time we get to Lower Decks, they're actually quite an advanced race, but they're still the way that they are. But there's some really good recurring jokes, like they refer to every ship as an Enterprise. Another Enterprise is coming. Oh my god, a third Enterprise.
See, the Packlids are there's a way of doing the Packlids that isn't seemingly that they've got learning difficulties. That's their thing.
Yeah.
I would have done them more like orcs. I would have done them like a little bit. Like nobody's telling you orcs are smart, but like I mean, I specifically mean like the space orcs in like Warhammer, where I think they only have technology because ships have crashed on planets that they were on, and they ride them until they explode.
Would argue that isn't that exactly the backstory of the Klingons?
I don't know. That's a good point. I don't know if the Klingons
The Klingons didn't invent their own stuff. They took it from someone else. They do have their own rich. Look, I'm not being anti-Klingon, right? We've discussed many times on this podcast. I actually quite like the Klingon culture.
Yeah,
I think it's really interesting.
I love the fact we're fine with offending any real world group, but we want to be clear on ourselves that we're not anti-fictional races. But
I have a lot of time for the Klingons, right? but I think we do know that in their past, to get to the level of technology, they did steal that from other races.
I can't imagine that they invented a warp drive, but I could fully imagine that a species with a warp drive landed on the Klingon homeworld and were like, oh, this will be easy. They've not even got lasers, and then got just stabbed to fuck.
Who is this podcast for? Because it's not for Star Trek fans, because we clearly don't know anything about Star Trek. So all we're really doing is annoying the people who know. Yeah, we're learning it. Yeah, exactly. We're learning it from. Imagine it's 1990. We're learning it for the first time, even though a lot of this is stuff that was probably covered in the original series, which we didn't watch.
I think we'll probably do the original series after we've finished Next Gen, just to get us on a level that we should be at before we should have really started at the beginning. So the shuttles have warp, or what? I think they do, but I think it's like a shit warp.
Yeah, like maybe one.
Because here's the thing, I think the warp drive's the thing that lets you go faster than the speed of light. And if you can't, then I don't care where you are, wherever you're going isn't 6 days away or 6 hours. It's fucking 40 years.
Yeah.
Because everything in space is real far apart. So I'm guessing they have like a shitty warp drive, like a little one. Like maybe they can do like warp 2.
Yeah, because 6 hours away from Earth is still basically the Earth. You wouldn't even get to the moon. Like they'd have to be basically there. Even if you're travelling at like light speed, like 6 hours is well outside of the solar system, absolutely, but not near anything. Like if the Enterprise is stopping 6 hours away from something at sublight speed, why don't they go the extra 4 seconds at warp? Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's okay, so to set this up, the B plot of the plot that's interesting in this is that Picard doesn't want Pulaski to do a medical procedure on him, which I thought at first was going to be some sort of rectal exam. So instead, he's going off to this planet where there's like a facility, and Wesley also is going to the same facility for exams. So they go off on like a little road trip, which is just tense and awkward. But Picard brings a packed lunch.
And some books.
Yeah,
and kind of opens up a little bit.
Yeah,
I really liked that.
Yeah, it's.
I am here, right? As much as like we've discussed on the podcast before that I still don't really know what it is that I like about Star Trek. Because like I do like the fact that it is just a bunch of people who like always make the right decision under the guidance available at that time and consult each other on how to solve problems. So really it's just a thing where nothing can really ever go wrong because someone will always solve that problem.
I wonder, Mark, why somebody living in the UK would love the power fantasy of competent people solving problems.
But also, and we're starting to get a little bit more of it in season 2. I love the character stuff, like, because we discover that Picard isn't just a hard ass, that he used to be a bit of a rebel, he used to be a bit of a bad boy.
Yeah, he's got this. The great story in this is that basically Picard needs to go get a new fake heart put in, and he's got a fake heart because he got in a bar fight with some Nausicaans when he was like 21, and they stabbed him through the back.
Yeah,
which he apparently found hilarious.
Yeah. Because I imagine, like, surely, because obviously Picard is a bit of a hard nut to crack, right? And he's very regimented, and he's not the super adventure guy that Kirk was. But I imagine that in order to become a captain, one of the qualities you would have to have is that you'd have to be approachable by people who weren't just your number one. And, like, you'd have to be good at telling stories. Because you are the figurehead. Like, you want people to do the things that you order them to, not just because they have to by rank, but because they actually like serving under you. Which it reminds me a little bit of an old teacher that I had. My English teacher was like super regimented, but everyone really respected him for it. So, in conclusion to my own point, disregard all that earlier things that I said.
I see, because the thing is, I would imagine as well, like, Picard is very deliberately very different from Kirk. But I would imagine that if you're Starfleet, you're looking for all of your like captains to be a little bit like Kirk, because like Kirk has saved the entire universe on like 14 separate occasions, and it's kind of like, well, that's what we want. We don't want somebody who's not going to save the universe.
Yeah, and like you should always, and I think they do this. I mean, I think Star Trek has. You could never accuse Starfleet of being. Well, maybe you can. Maybe we'll find out in later episodes. But you can't ever really accuse Starfleet of being discriminatory in the backgrounds by which they choose captains. Because James Kirk was like just a gunner on the Farragut. He was just in ops. Like, he wasn't a scientist. He wasn't necessarily he just, that's just what he did. He was just part of the infantry, and he got to be captain just because he's really good at captaining. Yeah, and it's it's that sort of thing. You don't like, given the vast differences between the people we've seen in the captain's chair in the different Star Treks, they've all got very different like backgrounds and stuff. Like, I don't see Ben Sisko ever wanting to go fucking horse riding. He spends his time on Earth, like at his dad's restaurant in New Orleans, listening to jazz. And he loves baseball, and that's a very different background to Picard, who's got a fucking vineyard in France and loves history. I just think they're like, no, you've got it. You've got what it takes, kid. You can have the big chair. So yeah, exactly. It's a proper meritocracy. Like, if you're just the best guy at potentially being captain, you'll get a chance at being captain.
Yeah.
And apparently there's only really one exam that you have to sit, which you can't pass anyway, so don't worry about
it. The only exam that gets referenced all the fucking time.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, one thing I did like about this episode as well is like how big because like at the beginning they're going to go to see like Picard's been told he has to go, and he's really gutted that he's going to miss the Epsilon pulsar survey, and then he goes to see like Riker, and Riker's like, you're going to miss the Epsilon pulsar survey. So apparently this pulsar survey is a real fucking big deal on board the Enterprise. Like, everyone's been jacked up about this shit for months now. This is like the equivalent of like the Foo Fighters gig in London the other day.
It's because the Epsilon are a race comprised entirely of tits. And Riker's like, oh my god, Picard, you have to see this. There's tits of every shape and size. Like, you can't, like, think of the perfect tits. They'll be there. So yeah, I get it.
I do want to point out, because we were saying that there's like you were saying, like everybody does everything perfectly in Starfleet. Not the case in this episode, Mark. there is an outright moment of complete character flaw in this episode. Because I noticed something in this episode, and I want to point it out because I feel it needs to be pointed out every time it occurs. There's a bit at the beginning of this episode where Geordi, Wesley, and Sonia Gomez are walking down a corridor. 3 of them abreast. And there's a bit where one guy walking the other way has to like squeeze around them. Walking 3 abreast down the Enterprise corridors is a dickish move.
That is a dick move.
Yeah, Wesley, walk behind. Or at least if you are going to do that, one of you moves out of formation when you see somebody coming the other way.
Yeah.
Which I know is a lot to ask of Geordi, but...
Oh, there's a stunt double coming.
Speaking...
Sorry, go on.
Sorry. No, you go.
I think it's actually kind of sad that we're going to lose Sonia Gomez. Not lose, she doesn't die. She actually, again, she gets the big chair. She becomes a captain in Lower Decks. But we don't really get to hang out with her quite a lot, which I think would have been really cool. Because, like, yeah, I get the Wesley thing was that in the 1980s, every TV show had to be there to sell toys. And for kids to want toys, there had to be someone for them to relate to, so there always had to be a kid and everything. Right? That's why Wesley is there. We've talked about this at great length. But I just don't find Wesley... Like, I'm not particularly interested in what does it take to get into the exam phase of Starfleet Academy. I don't really care. Like, I imagine Starfleet Academy is just like any academy. You go there, you do exams, you get drunk, you get stabbed in the heart by some Nauseans. And then you get a fake heart. But Sonia Gomez, like a new ensign on the Enterprise, probably staying in Lower Decks. Give me that.
Yeah, I mean that's very much what they do with Uhura in Strange New Worlds.
Yeah,
and it gives you a bit of an insight into what. And it's interesting. That said, I will say this: if anybody at Paramount ever listens to this, and I know you won't, but if you do, if you want to make like a fucking like traditional American high school like drama set at Starfleet Academy, I will watch the shit out of it.
Yeah.
That would be one of the best shows you could possibly make. I know.
Who would you... Right, so there has to be a legacy character, right? So for Star Trek Prodigy, which I haven't seen, they've brought back Kate Mulgrew as Admiral Janeway.
Yeah.
Who do you have as like the... I guess he'd be like the Mr. Feeney from Boy Meets
Miles
World.
O'Brien. Miles O'Brien ends up teaching at the academy.
Oh. I don't even... Because I was like, what captains are we going to... Of course it's Miles.
And Miles has got a kid. So Miles's kid could be in Starfleet. And then you've got an interesting... Paramount, I'm making this for you for free.
Yeah. And Column is amazing, but he's not got a lot on at the moment. As far as I'm aware, he's not in the Banshee of Inishme.
I don't think so.
With Brendan and Colin.
No, yeah, it's like if you I'm certain.
Which would matter because that's already finished. That's how filmmaking works. It's not like they come out and act that out live every time I go to see that in the cinema.
If Cole Meany was offered like a TV deal that is the equivalent of, I'm imagining Anson Mount is getting like a call somewhere close to $1 million per season of Strange New Worlds. I'm certain if they went to Cole Meany with that money and he was like, "Oh, is it a difficult job you want me to do?" It's like, "Can you just do O'Brien again?" He's like, "Yeah, that man has no inner life. I can do that easily."
I wonder if because, yes, obviously we were all excited for Strange New Worlds, but it was mainly because, it looks like it's going back to the old school of Star Trek. But
yeah.
Anson Mount, he was pretty good in Discovery, from what I understand from the episodes he was in. But Miles O'Brien, that's gotta... Like, there are people who likely haven't watched any new Trek.
Yeah.
Including fucking Picard. And if you turned around to them and said, there's a somewhat funny show... Miles O'Brien's going to be in it. They were like, yeah, I've got to watch that.
Oh, okay. I'd also do this as a character then. Okay, if you're doing that, one of the cadets is the current host of the Dax symbiote. So she's like having to do all Starfleet training, but also has been like drinking buddies with Miles O'Brien for a solid 8 years of her life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that's what I'm hoping. Yeah, of course Bashir shows up. Like I imagine him and Miles get very hammered on the holodeck. I just hope if they do have Bashir show up, they have the balls to finally establish that in canon that he ended up married to Garak, the Cardassian. Because there was a lot of flirting. You couldn't have gone away with it in the 90s, but 2022, yeah. Give me a loving gay couple, one Cardassian, one Starfleet doctor. Oh.
So, shall we discuss the A plot?
Yeah, oh god. Okay, this is one of the most important A plots in Star Trek history, because for the first time, Mark, in the history of this show, I can say the following sentence: Worf was right.
Yeah.
Right at the beginning, it's. I don't know how to say it without it coming. Look, I'm not trying to be offensive, but they're a race called the Packlids, and they basically come across as if they've got downs.
Yep, they sure do.
Yeah. They're referred to as being a little slow by Riker. That's where I have a problem. The actual idea beyond that, once you get past that, the actual plot's quite good.
Yeah. And like, they speak English, or they speak whatever language they have that is translated into English.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's not like they're coded as they're speaking a different language and they're struggling to speak English. They're just really bad at speaking English.
Yeah, it's like they go here.
They don't have
this.
The tenses. They constantly just repeat themselves. Yeah, it's an idea that certainly would have flown in 1990. You know, when people were worried about the uprising of the people with Down syndrome, and so Star Trek was like, no, let's show them that they are also people and have the ability to, you know, be able to handle being given the nuclear codes, etc. Which it hasn't aged particularly well now. I'd say we're a lot more compassionate and empathetic towards.
Yeah.
You know, Down syndrome isn't neurodiversity because it's a chromosomal problem. Like, it's mental disability, right?
It's the thing is I think there's a way of doing it.
Yeah.
Like, because the thing is, here's the issue that I have with it. The human beings in Star Trek aren't shown to be like way smarter than we are.
Yeah.
They know more stuff and they have access to tech and science that's developed years, but they're not intrinsically smarter than us.
Well, that's like a universal truth. Like think about how smart you perceive yourself to be. Not just you, right? The listener. Like, think about how smart you perceive yourself to be. Your ability to think, your ability to self-actualize, etc. Right? We've basically been this way for, 15,000 years? Like, you could potentially go back and get a guy from ancient Egypt, bring him forward, teach him things, and then he would just be the same as us. Like, they have the same thought capacity. They just didn't have as much stimuli or information at their fingertips.
Yeah, if you could grab somebody from the past and show them a TV, they would go from mind blown by the concept of a television to having a favourite show within a week.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's that thing of, and because of that, the problem is when you want to show somebody who is, the idea is that they're less advanced as a species and they've somehow got space tech. And if you want to do that, the only way you can do that is by making them appear dumber than the average human, which is where it gets like there's got to be a better way, I think, of doing that. But that said, the plot itself is interesting, which is just like they have been they've nicked, like, they've got Romulan shields and some Klingon weapons, so it's just clear that what they've done has been really deeply underestimated by some people and just nicked their shit and then legged it. And then presumably that ship has been too embarrassed to report that to anyone.
Yeah, and then in the end, Riker and Geordi, like, I guess if they'd solved the problem by he's thinking like, here's why people keep getting caught out by the Packleads. It's because they continually underestimate them. So we're going to solve this problem is by not underestimating them, and by giving them essentially the respect they deserve through our actions of being really clever about the way that we go about this. But they don't. They just outwit them.
They outwit them with a plan that only works because the people they're using it against are idiots.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's, we need to give Geordi a coded message, and instead of it being like a Starfleet thing that they've all agreed on beforehand, they're all like, Geordi, don't give them photon torpedoes and 24. And he's like, oh, I'll give them photon torpedoes, and then there's a 24-second countdown where I've got to turn them off. Like, yeah,
exactly. Like, there's a really good episode of Doctor Who called I can't remember what the first part's called, but the second part is called The Family of Blood.
Yes, it's the best two-parter of Human Nature and Family of Blood.
That's it, right?
Are the 2 episodes of modern Doctor Who I show to people to explain to them why they should watch Doctor Who, because they're incredible.
Which is weird, because it's arguably the two-parter that has the least amount of Doctor Who shit in it.
Yeah.
But he outsmarts the Family of Blood. He outsmarts them by appearing to be dumber than he is. So they underestimate him. And that's how they lose. So
yeah.
Why do the fucking crew of the flagship not figure out that they should probably pay these? I mean, that's like, this point is like raised in Lower Decks. Like, Mike McMahon, who makes Lower Decks, is clearly such a massive. It's clear he's not doing it for a job. Like, it's clear he's a massive Trekkie. But like us, just has issues with some of the ways that they go about things. Because the Pack-led story in Lower Decks, I would say, if not, like, I would go too far as to say it's an apology for this episode.
Yeah, it's the thing I think that annoys me about it is they don't have like a thing that like so like in Star Trek in general, most of the races you encounter as like serious, like ones that like you are going to have interesting like episodes that can be solved with dialogue sort of situations. So like excluding the Borg, excluding your giant space heads and stuff like that, but the ones where you can have like long-term political stories with like the Romulans, the Klingons, the Ferengi, people like that. It's usually you take away one part that makes you a human, and you turn that down. So, for example, Klingons don't really give a fuck about like empathy or fear. So you turn that right down and you replace it with like aggression and a warrior and on and on and that's what you do. The Packlids, it's like they just dialed down the intelligence but didn't dial up another like trait. Like you didn't get a thing like if they had like a hypno power or something like that, or if they were like hugely strong, like you could do so like it's like, oh no, yeah, like oh, they're dumb as a bag of rocks, but they can like bend steel with their bare hands, and now they've captured Geordi, would be like an interesting. And then you'd have like Geordi gets put down in the like basement and like in the like hold, and there's like a Romulan side engineer. Then they've got like engineers from like 4 different ships that they've captured.
Or even something like, I don't know how you would go about this. I don't know if this is like a Grant Morrison like mega drugged plot for something. But if there was like, if the thing that you dialed down was their intelligence, but the thing that you dialed up is how sneaky they were.
Yeah.
So that it kind of makes up for the low intelligence, but they're actually they're actually incredibly smart, but because they're not smart in the way that we are, we can't outwit them because they have a distinctly different type of intelligence. It's that same way that like I can't remember, they were talking about it on Blind Boy the other day, but it's like the idea that people have different types of intelligence. So like you take David Beckham, who is like sold to the public, and for his entire career has been sold to the public as, yeah, this guy's thick, right? But this guy could bend a ball and like his physical intelligence is like so far beyond anything that you can imagine. Like, give the Pac-Leds a type of intelligence that we just don't quite understand, so that there's no way around it without just sitting down and figuring it out. But they don't. Yeah, like, they'll just dumb. Yeah.
Give them something like you could give them something like, say, like a bullseye or Hawkeye like level of like spatial awareness or something like that. So it's like, oh yeah, they can, like, if you tell them how to do the complicated thing, they'll nail it first time every time. You can't really get away with them because they can like fire a like dart round a corner that will hit you with like a tranquilizer thing and stuff like that. They just can't work out how warp cores work.
Yeah, imagine if they had like a muscle memory that all they have to do is see something once and then they can do it. Yeah.
And then that makes them fantastic technology thieves. That's a good way of doing it. Like, if they see you do something, they can do it, but they don't have the capacity to innovate.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because then you could have, like they could, like they've, because then then you could have fun in the episode of like them learning more, have them not speak like the right, like be, it's not able to communicate with them, and then they can communicate back using only words that they've been told.
Yeah.
That's, and then you can do more or less the same exact plot, but you don't have to worry about two woke dickheads coming along 30 years later and just going, is it making fun of the disabled?
Yeah, like, give them extreme intelligence but no creativity. Yeah, exactly. That's interesting. Yeah,
but as it is, that's not what. And the worst thing is, well, they're not just dumb; they also deliberately made them fat. It's like they might as well just, like, because you get forehead bumps a lot in like Star Trek. They might as well just had ones that spelt out loser.
I honestly think we've said pretty much everything there is to say about the Pac-Led story. The only thing I wish is that, this is pretty much the only note I took, which is at one point Riker is like, I can't remember if it's Data, because we watched this about a week ago. I can't remember if it was Data who turns around and says, "Oh, I see that we're like, we're doing like a con, like we're conning them."
Yeah.
I wish that Riker had turned around and done. There's like a trope in certain media where like someone who looks a bit like a con man, which would be Riker, someone who's a bit in on it. I wish that Data had gone, "Oh, what is this? Some kind of trick?" And then Riker had gone, "Yeah, a ruse, a flim-flam, a mishmash." Like, I like it when they start saying all the different words. And Riker's into like 20s jazz, so like he would. I imagine he would have that. Like, I imagine that Riker unironically sometimes refers to groups of people as cats.
Yeah, I would love the idea of Riker just going like, "What we need is a Kansas City Shuffle," or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, and
Minneapolis Shakedown.
And it's also worth noting, like, that the story with the Pac-Leds is so underwhelming because there is no. The Pac-Leds don't actually represent any real threat. The issue is just that their ship is so weak that the Enterprise can't fire at it to knock their shields out because they'll probably blow it up and kill Geordi.
Yeah,
that's the problem. So to introduce any level of terror, like tension or odds, Picard's surgery has to go wrong, so that they are now on like timed clock because Pulaski is apparently the only doctor who can do the surgery.
Why are the surgeons dressed like handmaids from The Handmaid's Tale?
That is because modern surgery techniques in Star Trek are all based on what happens on Earth in the next 5 years, Mock.
I didn't understand, because the first thing that they do when they're all in there is he goes, "Right, turn on the sterilization field." So why do they have to wear the weird outfits? Why do they have to wear gloves?
It's like judges. It's just tradition. I was going to say, something I did love about this is we got the very rare Star Trek thing, which is the offshoot of technobabble, which is meadowbabble, which is specifically made up medical nonsense that sounds just about plausible.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we need to. What was it? We need a biomolecular physiologist in here. What is that? It sounds as if it's a thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I guess, what Pulaski is.
Does Picard, and this is the thing I was thinking about, does Picard have a heartbeat? Because if you've got a heart, there's no reason to have it pump like in beats. You just have it go.
Yeah.
So Picard might not have a heartbeat. Which
it would just speed up or slow down based on.
Which does mean Picard can at any point play dead. And it's something they should use in some future episodes. Like somebody goes down who he doesn't know about him, like listens to for his pulse, and there's nothing.
Someone who doesn't listen to this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. So most people can do this.
That's an interesting question.
Would you be okay not having a pulse?
Would I be okay?
Yeah.
I mean, I very rarely check my own pulse. I generally assume that if I'm able to wonder how my pulse is getting on, then my pulse is probably fine.
I think that it's one of those things that wouldn't bother me like 95% of the time. And then I'd like 99% of the time. And every now and then I get reminded of it, and it just makes me go, ooh.
Yeah, I think about that quite a lot, right? Because I'm like... Because quite often I'll just be... I daydream a lot, right? I basically don't have a lot to do most of the time. I should be spending that time improving my creative endeavours, but I don't. So I spend a lot of time just sitting, no telly, no music, nothing, just lying in the quiet, imagining what it would be like if I was a vampire, right? Now, obviously we're going... I tend to... But the first thing to do whenever I'm up for a daydream is, what are the rules, right? And I usually go for like your... Can't go out into the sunlight. Religious stuff doesn't really come into it, right? Because I think that's nonsense. Needs to eat people, right? Needs to drink people. And I'm like, how would I deal with that? Like, because at first I think, well, I'm ginger, so I don't particularly like going out during the day anyway. But I think I'd start to miss the sun quite quickly.
Yeah, I could see that.
Now, vampires, this is a weird thing about vampires. Vampires traditionally don't have heartbeats, but the reason that vampires need to drink blood, traditionally in modern pop culture, is that their own blood can't sustain them. So they have to just keep replacing that blood through feeding. But that blood must be going somewhere, right? Has to be... It's like, I remember reading a Buffy novel when I was cool. And it brought up the fact that Angel doesn't need to breathe, but he does need to bring air into his lungs in order to speak.
Yeah.
I was like, I've never thought about that. I guess he does.
Yeah, so that's it. So isn't it? So if vampires are taking in liquid to sustain themselves, and getting the nutrients out of it, do they piss? Do they piss blood?
There's an excellent vampire movie called The Night Flyer.
Right.
Have you ever seen it? It's starring Miguel Ferrer.
I've not seen it.
Oh man, right, it's really good. I'm going to spoil the fuck out of it for you, right? So basically, it's about a reporter for the Weekly World News who discovers that small airports throughout the US keep having massacres happen at them, where a lot of people have been drained of all their blood, and he figures out that it's a vampire that can fly a plane. And the vampires, like, look it up, man. The vampires, like, pretty terrifying looking. Like, they make it like a real monster. I think it's based on Stephen King. And he figures out where the next attack is going to happen. So he goes there with his camera, hoping to capture it. But he goes in, and the vampires already attacked this tiny airport, right? So there's bodies strewn everywhere. And he follows the bodies to the bathroom, where we, as the audience, see it as him looking in the mirrors as he hears footsteps behind him, but doesn't look behind him. He's looking in the mirror, and then all you hear is zip, unzip, and then at the urinal, a stream of blood just comes out of nowhere. So that vampire pisses blood. But the thing is, you wouldn't piss blood because you don't just piss out what you drink. You piss out the toxins and the bad things that your body can't process.
But if I drink a Barocca, the piss comes out yellow. So I'm guessing if I drank only blood, I'd piss out a blood-coloured substance.
And vampires do drink other things, like they drink booze.
Yeah.
So you would have to piss that out.
Yeah. I know in if you're playing Vampire the Masquerade, you can take the ability to eat food without vomiting as like a perk that you can have. Like as a thing, so you can't do anything with it. And then like later on you have to throw up to get it out, but it's just a thing you can do so that like you can be eating a burger in front of someone and they go, well, this guy's eating a burger. He's clearly not a vampire. And you hope they don't look in the reflection of in the window.
I bought Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines the game on PC. Right. And I was going to play it after I completed Deus Ex, and then I never actually finished Deus Ex. So
no, nobody ever does.
Yeah, I got to the fucking bit where you're in the catacombs under Paris and you need to figure out how to get through the gas-filled room, and I was just like, no.
At least I would say this: Deus Ex is infinitely more completable than Deus Ex Human Revolution. Because Deus Ex Human Revolution has like two bosses where you just can't where it's like, oh, this guy, you're now locked in a room with a guy who's got a minigun, and it's like, right, okay, but I've put all of my stats into sneaking around.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. I've completed Human Revolution more than once.
Oh really?
Yeah, I've actually completed Mankind Divided more than once. I really like the other Deus Ex games. The original is obviously demonstrably better. But anyway, the point was I'm going to play that Vampire the Masquerade.
Yeah. But I've heard it's good. I've only ever played like Vampires the tabletop game, which is just usually very political and a lot of talking and not much killing. Because the whole point, the whole point is basically that like you should like if you make it, it's like, oh, you just got to stay alive by killing people. That's actually very boring very quickly. It's much more interesting if you go, no, vampire society is on the brink of collapse and there's a war and shit. That's much more intriguing. But I got into like talking about like getting into like daydreaming about the rules and stuff. I was getting into a discussion the other night with my girlfriend about the rules. Well, we were basically walking along and the moon looked very fat in the sky, and my girlfriend said, watch out for werewolves. And I said, well, no, it's not a full moon, so you don't have to. But then I was like, does that mean like if I was like on a spaceship over there, like off to the, like far away off the Earth, that from my view, the moon is full, right? Am I going to transform if I'm a werewolf? If you're a werewolf, because here's my question is, if you're a werewolf in the future, in the human galactic empire, are your transformations based on when Earth's moon is pointing in your direction? Or is it locked to when it's a full moon on Earth?
If what triggers the transformation is a full moon, which is just the moon that reflects the most amount of sunlight, why aren't werewolves just wolves during the day?
Yeah. Or they would be, like, because it's always reflecting the most amount of light, just not onto the Earth. So it must be direct light. And therefore, like, if you're a werewolf and you're far away from the Earth, because I imagine it's like even trace matters as long as it's pointing at you, but you're going to be on a completely different cycle that you don't understand at all based on how long it's taken that light to travel there.
I think we've discussed this on the podcast before, but I'm kind of obsessed with like the etymology of monsters and stuff. Basically, everything that we know about werewolves came from the Wolfman in the 1940s. The idea of like the full moon and silver, all of that lore, none of that existed in any of the previous lore. And in fact, even then, like the ideas of a werewolf isn't that old. It was like the turn of the century was the first time that a man who becomes a wolf entered into the public consciousness. Like this idea that like, oh man, skinwalkers have been doing it for years, and the French have had the ideas of like, it's like, yeah, but they're actually different creatures. Like werewolves are a 20th century invention.
Yeah, nearly every society has like a human turning into an animal thing, but the werewolf curse and the silver thing is from vampires, which we don't normally have as like vampire lore anymore. But yeah,
it's why they say that vampires can't see themselves in reflection, is because mirrors used to have a silver back.
Yeah,
to make them more reflective, so they just can't see themselves in the silver. Now, right. I think we've talked about it on this podcast actually fairly recently, but in the sequel to Dracula 2000, which was helpfully called Dracula 3000, if I remember correctly, they actually utilise a really misunderstood part of vampirism and the vampire mythos, which is that if you throw down a bunch of sand or grains of rice, they have to count all the grains.
Yeah.
They all have obsessive compulsive disorder. Basically, shit like that proves that literally everything that we understand about monsters came from the fact that people in the past didn't appreciate people who were just a little bit different.
Yeah.
Obsessive compulsive disorder. No, you must love sucking people's blood.
Isn't it weird how since that weird guy with the obsessive compulsive guy happened, a lot of people have died in town? Well, I mean, what do you mean by a lot of people? We live in the Middle Ages. A lot of people dying constantly. It's like, yeah, but like 20 people have died since he showed up. Yeah, but 20 people died the month before as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he wasn't here then, so I don't reckon he was responsible. You've missed my point.
Must have been super difficult being woke in the 16th century.
I don't like to call them as vampires. I like to think of them as sunlight disabled.
Yeah.
Would you?
What do you think Picard had on his sandwiches?
I was going to say, to bring it back to Picard and Wesley, I do want to discuss one moment in their little chat, their little interaction that I really enjoyed, which is like, so we know like canonically Picard doesn't like kids.
Yeah.
And then like Wesley was like, "Oh, did you want kids?" And Picard's like actually quite opens up about it, and he's like, "You know, I wasn't against the idea, but you know, I wanted to be a Starfleet captain. It's like a lot of commitment." And Wesley's response to this is, and he says like, "And you've got to take that on board if you want to get far in Starfleet." And Wesley's like, "Don't worry, sir. It's not going to be a problem. I'm in control of my emotions." And it's like, Wesley, you have been given the option of having a relationship with exactly one woman, and you were willing to destabilise a society for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up, Wesley.
I would have. I think I was thinking about this. I think this is a good episode that would have been. I would have preferred somebody other than Wesley to be on this like trip that like Picard opens up to. I think you could have had a lot of fun with it being Data.
I think it should have been Sonia Gomez.
Oh, that could have worked, yeah.
Because she's in it. She's in the episodes. Might as well use her.
Here's what they should have done with Sonia Gomez, okay? Is they should have had her around like for like a full season, right? And then just redshirted her. Like have her be the faceless person who gets like killed by like the random bad guy.
Yeah.
To like actually... Because again, like we're still at a point in Next Gen where not a lot of like fucking people have died. We lost like 2 guys in season 1. And, like
we had the 18 assimilated by the Borg last week.
Yeah, the 18 assimilated by the Borg, which is for a Borg encounter pretty low, and we didn't see any of it happen on screen.
Yeah,
like nobody. So yeah, we've been. I feel they were trying to avoid what must have been, at that point, the most common Star Trek joke, right, was like...
Yeah.
So maybe they were like, okay, let's not just casually kill off 90% of the crew over the course of the season.
Yeah, people will find it confusing.
Yeah. But, yeah, I like Sonia Gomez. I wish we'd gotten a bit more with her.
I agree.
But yeah, there's not... the problem with this episode is it's fine.
Yeah.
I will say this as somebody who has watched a couple a bit more ahead. The whole story of how Picard gets his like heart done, that comes into play in quite a big way in later episodes. A Q one specifically.
Yep. I was talking to Laura about this during the episode. I said one of the few episodes I have seen is that Q gives him a chance to change that.
Yeah, and I love that in that episode when he's jumped back in the past and he gets stabbed and it's put him back on the right timeline, and that's why he laughs when he gets stabbed.
Yeah,
which is like something he doesn't have an explanation for. But I also just like the idea that I want to see more. Like, we've learned a bit about like apparently everybody on the Enterprise has a period of their life where they're fucking hanging around the dodgiest fucking outer rim planets where they're watching like dogfights and getting stabbed over pool games.
Yeah.
And I get that, like, to a degree they did that a bit in like Deep Space Nine with Quarks.
Yeah.
But man, I'd love to watch a series that's set in the Star Trek universe but like outside of Federation space, where it's just somewhere like this, and like maybe the Federation pop by every now and then, like somebody pops in for an episode.
It would need to be like that trope that we've discussed quite a lot, like that idea of like the bartender and the bar owner who stays neutral.
Yes.
Yeah. The bar would be called the neutral zone.
Oh man, that's a good idea. But you can't set it on the edge of Romulan space though. You got to put it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just Romulans and the Federation that you've got in. But I know, actually completely unrelated, nearly completely unrelated to Star Trek. I want to say this. I saw the trailer for the new Quantum Leap today.
Does it look good?
It looks fucking fantastic.
I love Quantum Leap.
It's a direct sequel, as far as I can tell, of like, because
he's going looking for Sam, right?
Well, he doesn't know why he's done it because his memory's fucked, which is, again, from the original. And that's the thing, is like, it's trying to refine technology that went wrong when nobody's entirely certain what went wrong with the original thing.
Yeah.
And the guy who did it, because like one of the recurring things is that like he has to be told about stuff because he doesn't have a decent memory of the future. So Sam Beckett doesn't know in Quantum Leap why he quantum leapt in the first place. I can only hope. The only thing I want from the new series is for there to be an episode where he meets Sam and either gets him home safely or learns that he is more than happily jumping through time, putting right what once went wrong.
I want an episode where he goes back in time and meets the actual playwright, Sam Beckett. And he's like, "Who are you?" And the guy goes, "I'm Sam Beckett." And so he spends the entire episode thinking that that's the guy he's sent here to find. And when he leaves him alone at the end of it, that's what inspires Samuel Beckett to write Endgame. Because he's like,
I want an episode where he jumps into the actor Scott Bakula. Or, to be fair, how it should end is he jumps into Samuel Beckett and doesn't quantum leap.
Yeah.
Or does quantum leap as Samuel Beckett, and that's why Beckett doesn't know why he did it, because it wasn't him, it was the new guy. He's like, no, he has to quantum leap because otherwise the rest of time is fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll watch that.
Yeah.
I saw Nope yesterday.
Oh, is that any good?
I very much enjoyed it.
I need to check that out.
It's one of these films, as I was saying to Laura, I was like, I think I'm going to have to watch that again because it seems to be about a lot of things.
Yes, I've heard that.
It doesn't have the social commentary that Get Out. I've never seen Us, but it certainly doesn't have the social commentary that Get Out has. But as far as I can tell, Nope is Jordan Peele making a movie about how he really needs people to stop thinking that he's ever going to do better than Get Out. And you know that way that I said to Laura, I was like, I'd love to put that to him. Like, when I'm rich and famous and he's coming around for dinner, I'm going to be like, look, I don't want this question to sound like, do you realise that you peaked at Get Out? But is Nope about how you peaked at Get Out and you wish people would just stop getting on at you about it?
I still love Till I Die. There's an interview from Peter Cook when he was in his 50s, and somebody's asking him about what's his favourite thing that he's ever written, and he's talking about how it's the one leg too few, one-legged Tarzan sketch, which he did with Dudley Moore, and it was originally written for the Footlights,
right?
Beyond the Fringe, and he goes, and he's talking about it. He goes, and I wrote that when I was 19, and I've tried so hard every day to not be depressed about the fact that I've not written anything as good since.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of things that I hope get better, that was Star Trek.
Yeah. It's a fine,
fine
episode. Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, long-term listeners. We really are getting to that point where if there's just nothing to talk about, then we're just going to have to go on fucking tangents. Which I'm pretty sure.
But you've learned something about vampires.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. I think so.
And
we rambled about vampires. Whether you learned anything.
Statistically speaking, like, you aren't gonna, if you're listening to this, you're not gonna live long enough to see the Star Trek future. but you might get attacked by a vampire.
Yeah, exactly.
Both things are very unlikely things to happen, but one of them at least happens in the current time frame.
Oh.
So if you do see a stream of blood piss appear behind you in a bathroom mirror, probably leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Bye.
Bye.